Hi, everybody. My name is Sean Prophet, and welcome to the second episode of our show.
I am Christophe Difo. I am happy to be here again. Interesting fun fact is I wear a new t-shirt every show. This is the symbol of the United Federation of Planets. Now, Sean and I are big fans of Star Trek, and this is the big organization in Star Trek. And the reason why I'm wearing it today is because it's all about values that we take very seriously. Justice being paramount about that, on that front. But a whole range of things that we're going to talk a little bit about in terms of the show. But this is my little shtick. I wear these shirts and Star Trek for life.
That's awesome, by the way. And I've always been interested in the fact that the Star Trek kind of Federation logo looks very much like the United Nations logo.
Exactly.
And I think that's intentional. And I've always been a big fan of the United Nations, and it's too bad that that organization has not lived up to its potential.
It's been deliberately undermined, and I think that's important too by some of the more powerful people. I mean, in the GOP in particular, but we could get into that. We get into that at some point.
Maybe anyway, that's for another show. So, how's it going? How are you doing out there in New Jersey right now?
How are we doing? Well, I think we're going to talk a little bit about the pandemic a little bit later on, but, I think it's a little bit discouraging to walk around and see people pretending like that there is no pandemic. So that's a little bit challenging, but I think, sort of day to day, the great news is we are still healthy. Lindsay had a birthday yesterday. And so we celebrated that, like we got some food from a local restaurant and we did it here and it was really, really nice, and it made me think a little bit about the pandemic and just like how our relationship has in a lot of ways blossomed during the pandemic. Only just because we were just together all the time. And you would think that might be, and I'm not saying we have a perfect relationship, obviously, we have disagreements, we nitpick, right? Whatever, just normal relationship stuff.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, happy birthday to Lindsay.
And how about you, dude?
Oh, it's kind of the same here. It's hot, windy in Henderson, and of course, Vegas has just they tried to open up the casinos, and
oh, that's right,
not going well. 1,000 new cases right now in a day in Vegas. So it's like, it's kind of the same thing. I've been staying home a lot with Jillian, and we're doing great. It's just like you said, we get to spend so much time with each other. But the hard part about all this is just not really knowing what is going to be happening in the future, and especially the more people are, not paying attention to the science, and the more that they are, reopening, and we're seeing people starting to cases creep up, deaths creep up, all of those things. It's just very uncertain for our future, and the planet's nation. Like, what are we doing here? So
you're right.
Very hard to know.
No leadership, right? No leadership at all, and no national. I mean, this is an obvious story, and again, we are going to talk a little bit about COVID-19 and the spike, and I guess maybe this is the transition here. I don't know.
Well, I want to talk a little bit more about our show, and this being episode 2, we're still clearly working out all of our branding. We had a meeting yesterday, and we're going to be doing a formal launch. But in the meantime, there's so much to talk about. We just got to keep going, and I think it's helping us to refine our show, our process. Communicate with our viewers and listeners, and also you'll notice last time I had an orange wall behind me. Well, now I have a green screen, and I'm not really sitting in a loft, although I wish I were. And I was jealous, Chris, of your cool background. So I had to get something that was cool.
It's so funny. So at work, I work at in the same space most of the time, and so I do Zoom calls and WebExes and all this sort of thing over the years, and I have this background behind me, and people always say, like, wow, what a beautiful wall, Christophe. Just such a beautiful wall. I wish I had that wall. And this is not a real wall. This this is actually just a screen. And so I also do my own little show on Instagram called The Too Late Show. And this is sort of the symbol from it. And so, like, it's that sort of old school,
Isn't that Max Headroom?
Yeah, exactly. but it's, if you look at it in the actual room, it looks like a fake thing. But on the screen, it really does well, and it's like, whatever, like $50 on Amazon or something like that. You were saying earlier, right? Like green screen stuff used to cost. This used to be like movie theater stuff.
Oh,
right?
to do a green screen shoot. I mean, me coming from television, I know that like, even 10 years ago, 5 years ago, if you wanted to do a live streaming shoot with green screen, that involved a lot of setup, a lot of, multiple cameras and, all sorts of things and special lighting and, a lot of people standing around. And now it's just your laptop and a paint your wall or whatever.
Exactly. Now you're in a loft. You're in a loft. Just like that. In Henderson, Nevada.
Yeah. So anyway, well, I guess we're going to talk about COVID.
Yes.
And, this
we
is
have
just
a little outline here, by the way, audience. We have a little outline. We're trying to keep it a little bit focused. We heard you. We heard you from the last time. You wanted it to be a little bit more focused, and we are trying to make it a little bit more focused. Sean and I riff off each other a lot, but we're going to try and keep it focused. We're working on it.
Yes. Got the paperwork to prove it here. So I think the thing we have to most talk about today is that Sacha Baron Cohen prank song.
Oh my God.
I mean, is that hilarious or what? I mean, I don't even know what to say.
I thought the same thing. You sent it to me earlier today, and you're like, you have to watch this, and I did, and really unreal. And maybe you want to describe it for people who haven't seen it. But the bottom line is, like, he infiltrates a like 3%er, which is like a super right wing, almost militia-esque, not so almost militia-esque, like militia-esque sort of faction on the right. And they have, like, they're doing like this like anti-tyranny thing or whatever. And he infiltrates it as one of their guest singers. So he's up there on stage doing this song, and he's wearing a beard and a hat.
The whole bit,
overalls on, the whole thing, and he's got this like Southern twang. But the kicker is that he's saying these awful things.
Like inject Obama with the Wuhan flu and chop him up like the Saudis do, right? Like that's literally, and he's getting these people to sing along with him. It's incredible.
Yeah, he's incredible. He's riling them up, right? He's like da 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 da, Wuhan flu, and like, I mean, the people in the crowd at first are a little bit like sort of weird, but it didn't take long. It did not take long for them to get the. And next thing you know, everybody's chanting, and it's like, is this a Nuremberg rally? I mean, it's just like, what's going on here?
It just makes it so clear that trolling the right wing is like feeding candy to a baby. You tell them what they want to hear, they will sing anything. They will say anything. As long as it fits in with their ideology, if they think you're one of them, they're on board. And of course, it turned out that I saw another interview with the organizer of the rally, and I guess Sacha Baron Cohen brought along security because he thought that they might be kicked out or whatever. So once they figured out what was going on, they wanted to shut him down. They were trying to cut off his generator, but he had security guards at the generator, wouldn't let him cut it off. And so it's like, meanwhile, the crowd is still singing along with this whole thing, and they're trying to stop it because they realize how embarrassing this is. It was the most fucking brilliant thing I've ever seen. I mean, he was great back with Ali G, but like all of a sudden, it's just on another level now.
I mean, I remember he did this thing once. He's a brilliant guy, obviously. I remember he did the one thing where he went on like a bus with like these like frat boy type, corn-fed frat boy white folks, and and he was on the bus, and he was like, they don't realize that he's trolling them as he's trolling them.
They do not.
And so he's like saying all this stuff to get them to say racist things, and of course they do. But this is now on a whole other level. Like, this is like he infiltrated this and this group, and and just exposes them for what they are, and like they're even saying like, right, people wear a mask, inject them with the Wuhan flu. Like, I mean, it was like, or liberals, Hillary Clinton, all the
Obama, lock them up, chop them up, lock them up like the Saudis do, chop them up like the Saudis do. It was unbelievable. Like, unbelievable. And they were singing it. You can hear the crowd singing. It was amazing.
It's remarkable. It's remarkable. Yeah. So that was absolutely fascinating, and I think that's an important sort of segue or discussion in terms of what we're seeing here, right? Because we're seeing now all these southern states and also California, but particularly, right, you have Florida and Arizona.
Well, you can't forget California has got, it's 2/3 liberal, 40 million people. That means there's 13 million conservatives in California.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
You're going to see a lot of mass protesting in California going on, as we saw at Trader Joe's. You see the lady in Trader Joe's using the term?
No, I don't think I saw that one.
Okay, well, she went into Trader Joe's, and everybody, it's the opening day, I guess, reopening of the store, and everybody around her is wearing a mask, and she's not, and people are talking to her about it. And she literally threw down her basket and started screaming and ran out. And then the person who was filming, she got right in their face and said, you're violating federal law. I am a disabled person. I can't breathe with a mask on. You are violating federal law. It's just like, I don't even know how to respond to some of this stuff, because obviously it's not a logical argument. If it was a logical argument, it would, there wouldn't be a problem. There wouldn't be people, if they could be reached through logic, they would be wearing their masks. That's as simple as
Absolutely. And I think this is really important, right? Because I remember, we were talking to our friend Tim yesterday, who's going to help us with the branding. And I was introducing you to each other, and we talked about how I visited you in 2016, right before the election. I mean, it was like literally days before the election. I was there for a Bad Religion show, and it was called the Vox Populi tour, right?
Oh,
and I was like, I wanted to see my favorite band's Bad Religion in the whole world. You will see many of those T-shirts, by the way, over the course of this show.
I can't wait.
But the point is that we were talking. And we were scared, we were afraid, but we were devastated the next day after we lost. But I remember early on that I would try to approach this from this rational perspective of like, well, it must be that the Trump supporter doesn't understand the facts, or doesn't know that they're voting against their interests, or is just being bamboozled by X, Y, and Z. But the reality is, like you say, this is an emotional, visceral reaction to loss of status.
Well, yeah, and okay, so you have to take it back to first principles. We were talking a little bit about this last time about libertarianism and how unsuited libertarianism is towards civilization, because in civilization we have so many things that require cooperation. People have to obey traffic laws. They have to. You can't encroach on your neighbor's yard. You can't, there's all these things that require, boundaries to be drawn. And, in ecology, it's called a collective action problem, right? Externalities, the tragedy of the commons, right? All of those things. If everybody, if you've got I think most people know what the tragedy of the commons is, but I'll just explain it. If there's a pasture and everyone is able to graze their sheep on that pasture, pretty soon the pasture is going to be all grazed out, whereas there's no incentive for anyone to cultivate or help that pasture stay productive. So what ends up happening is that over time, when the tragedy of the commons is that no one has a place to graze their sheep. Whereas if everybody established limits on how big your flock could be, how often you could graze, all of those things, now you have a successful situation where everybody benefits. And this is a problem about climate change, fossil fuels, all of that. It's just the same problem. And libertarianism basically says it's a rights framework in the sense of rights without responsibilities. You have a right to graze your sheep. You have a right to drive your car. You have a right to walk around without a mask. All of those things without considering the consequences to the commons. And I think
absolutely. You know what I've described this as before, but I've been thinking about this week, is like it's and I think a great way to think of this is it is prioritizing my freedom to versus your right to be free from, right? And so like we're prioritizing my freedom to do something to you or do something in the environment rather than everyone else's right to be free from negative externalities.
Positive versus negative liberty, I think, is how that's talked about.
Perfect.
Yeah, and so that's the thing, the old idea that I can swing my arm, as much as I want, anywhere I want, and until it stops and hits someone's nose or face. I can literally walk down the street doing this all day long, and as long as I'm not hitting someone in the face or some other part of their body, I'm okay. But the mask wearers or the mask protesters are basically violating that rule because they are releasing projectiles. You could consider them little bullets.
Exactly.
I mean, they're releasing bullets from their mouth that would be stopped by a mask, because even though the virus is smaller, it's coated in liquid, and so the mask will absorb the liquid, and the virus will have a very low chance of getting through. And that's what people don't understand is you're wearing the mask for other people. You're not wearing it for yourself.
Exactly.
And because if you go in, if you are wearing a mask and you're in a room full of unmasked people, you're at great danger.
Absolutely. It only takes one person.
Through your eyes. You can contract COVID through your eyes. So the key with mask wearing is it requires universal compliance because the droplets cannot be allowed to freely float in the room. Once you've got people in a room and they're releasing aerosols, they hang in the air for 10 to 15 minutes even after they've left the room. So the mask prevents those droplets from hanging in the air where other people can encounter them even after you've left.
Absolutely, and we've done, and you talked about this. I think I think we have this somewhere in the outline, but I think that this is an important point, and that is right. First of all, the masks work, right? The entire argument that masks don't work or they don't make a difference, which is one of the obviously false arguments on the right, coming out of the right. First of all, even if we can go back a little bit and talk about how we are the only country that's so politicized this virus, and of course that comes right from the top. So it's nothing but negative leadership from the top on this. But again, the masks do work, and you can see there's plenty of those sort of demonstrations online of somebody coughing, in a black.
Oh yeah, no, room. I was sold on this back in March because there was a Japanese there's a Japanese video.
It's just obvious on common sense grounds, right?
But there was this video, and they did an analysis with a high-speed camera and special lighting so that you could see all the droplets that people were releasing, and they showed how it worked when people came into a room and how long it took for these things to clear, how far they spread in the room, which is very far. Like a cough can go 20 feet. If you cough, 20 feet. Right. So all this stuff has been analyzed in the laboratory.
That's insane.
Yeah. Yeah. And so choirs, everybody goes, well, why is it that we can have, hold on, I lost you for a sec. Oh, there you are. How is it that we can have people going to rallies and that's not a problem, but if people are in church, that's a problem? This is a big right-wing argument, right? Well, the real reason is because in church you are, a lot of churches, people, they recite things back to the pastor. They sing in a choir. So there's a lot of vocalizing. And every time you vocalize, those droplets are spreading out throughout the room. So an interior church service is probably a level 9 or a level 10 danger as compared to being outside in a crowd might be a level 3 or 4, And so there's all this false
It's akin to being in a coffee shop.
Oh, a coffee shop is as bad as a church. Everybody's coughing.
That's what I'm saying. Anywhere where anyone's going to be in close proximity and talking or singing, for Christ's sake. Think of singing, right? Or a bar. Oh my God, the bar.
Well, a bar. Laughing is equivalent to coughing because you're going
exactly.
Right? Laughing is talking or is coughing. And so this is people are
Absolutely.
Just the idea that this is a matter of personal liberty is insane because what you're doing is you're assaulting every other person in that room. It's an assault with a deadly weapon, really. Maybe it only has a 1% chance of killing you, but if would you stand in front of a gun if the bullet had a 1% chance of killing you? No, you wouldn't.
Right, of course you wouldn't. You wouldn't.
You wouldn't.
And that's exactly right. I mean, you have it's like these essentially temper tantrums. And look, I mean, we could talk about these sort of the people on the right who are demanding to go to church or wherever else, but I'm seeing, like, you know, I live here in Jersey City, a bastion of liberalism, right? A bastion of liberalism. And, you know, my wife and I went downtown to pick up some food. Shout out to Lindsay Brightman. We went down to pick up some food at a place called Roman Nose. Also shout out to Roman Nose, great restaurant. And we were walking through, and we hadn't been downtown in a long time. And it was alarming. I mean, it was just throngs of people, Sean, throngs of people. And sure, you know, the restaurants, you could eat outside. So, but they were spread out, you know, like, I guess 6 feet. But again, there's a bunch of people there.
No, it's a problem. It's a problem because
and talking, right? Eating and talking. I mean, like, that's what you do when you go out to dinner. There's just clouds of COVID. I mean, come on. Like, I mean, you know, and again, it's just so distressing because, and this I think is an important point, is like, it's how people have rationalized this. So on the right, they just pretend like it's not a problem. But here on the left, people and like people have sort of, it's like this faulty reasoning of saying that, like, well, as long as I like skirt the rules, right? As long as I just barely comply with the rules, then I'm not going to get sick. I mean,
here's the problem.
It's terrifying.
The problem with that thinking is that, you know, they're acting as if they're dealing with, you know, high school principal or a cop being caught, right, or whatever. This is not an issue of authority. This is an issue of your health. And a virus that doesn't give a shit. The virus doesn't give a shit about your, you know, whether you wanted to go out to eat or whether you wanted to go to church. It doesn't. It's there to reproduce itself. It doesn't even want to kill you. It actually wants you to live so that you can spread it to others. That's what a virus really wants. It's not even trying to kill you. It's just trying to go through its life cycle. It's indifferent to our priorities, to our wants and needs. You know, it's like, no, sorry. And, you know, it's like, look, I feel the same way. I mean, we've been cooped up in this house now for close to, you know, it's coming up on 3 months. And
it's been a long time.
You know, and it's hard. It's been hard from a business standpoint. You know, our business is closed, and you know, like loan money's about to run out. You know, the Paycheck Protection Program. You know, so there are many reasons why this sucks, and at the same time, those reasons are the same reasons why you should not give in to the temptation to go out to eat or go to a bar, because on top of everything else, you could die, be very sick, huge medical bills. Did you read about the guy who had a $1.1 million COVID bill?
Jesus, no, but of course he did. This is America.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And a lot of insurance policies that are not, you know, Obamacare did away with lifetime caps, but a lot of insurance policies have like $1 million lifetime caps. So he's already, his insurance is done. He can never get insured again. Wow. You know, and he owes $100,000, right? So
wow,
it's like, it's really it's a sobering thing, and that kind of also makes the turn into this concept of how, you know, people wanted to reopen to fix the economy, but actually reopening is even worse for the economy than staying closed, because if you reopen too soon, one of the things that's happening is the stock market has basically ignored the fact that there's even a pandemic going on. I mean, it dropped, but then when the stimulus money came out, all this money is being injected into the system. Everybody's going, oh, V-shaped recovery, we're coming right back. You know, that's not going to happen. And the sooner we realize that's not going to happen, the sooner the value of the market can adjust to reality. We can start digging out of the hole. Because right now the country hasn't even admitted that it's in a hole yet.
Exactly. And again, I can't stress this enough. This comes right from the top, right? I mean, like the man's re-election strategy is first of all stoke all the wedge issues that he possibly can stoke. Obviously, that goes without saying. That's his entire brand. But the second thing is he's hanging his hat on a V-shaped recovery, right? But a V-shaped recovery, and for those who don't understand, right, that means like you get a huge drop, but we have a quick turn off, right? So instead of like a U-shaped recovery or we have a really steep drop, but a steep comeback. And that's sort of what his whole branding of this situation is. But of course, the problem with this, unlike everything else that Trump has faced, I wrote an article about this a couple months ago, is that this is the first time that he has ran right into reality, right? You cannot spin the virus. And that goes to what you were just saying before, Sean, right? We cannot spin the virus. You cannot pretend this is not happening, because real people are going to die. And they are dying right now.
They're dying.
Right?
They're dying today. You
like
know?
right now, I mean, and a friend of mine named David, great guy, super smart guy I went to law school with, he just recently said like that, like the day that he posted an article, it was a 9/11 event that in one day in America, on a 9/11 event, and it's happening almost every day now, right? A 9/11 event is happening in terms of people dying. That's what's happening, right? To put things in perspective, right? Right, the 68,000 Americans died, I think of 68,000, or maybe 58,000. So 58,000 Americans died in the Vietnam War. We are double that right now.
We're around, our total right now is around the World War I level of death.
Exactly.
Which,
that's where we are.
Interestingly enough, coincided with the 1918 pandemic, and I believe that killed something like 600,000 Americans. I don't know.
It was something insane.
It's insane.
It's something like 5 million worldwide or something like that. I mean, like some insane number worldwide.
Huge.
Insane number worldwide. And also, I like to point out, and you, I think, were the first person who told me about this, but that there was an anti-mask league during the 1918 pandemic, right?
There absolutely was.
Where there was a bunch of people talking about their liberty and how, they wanted to reopen the economy. And this goes to show that these themes keep coming back, right?
Well, they're very human. This is what you have to realize. If you read in the Righteous Mind, talking about the various moral foundations, and some of those moral foundations have to do with authority, hierarchy, and all of those things that we keep coming back to. Is Absolutely. That those are real values that a lot of people believe in, and it's also there's the cultural aspect to this, aside from the dumb argument about people not being able to get enough oxygen. It's like,
right.
Well, you say they don't work, but then you're worried about not getting oxygen. I mean, it's like
exactly. So wait,
which is it? And then there's the guys who think that it makes them look weak, or that they're being muzzled. Their mouth is being muzzled like a dog,
It's just like and like you pick this stuff up off of like OAN and these like right wing, just like trash, like people that just crank out right wing conspiracy theories. It's really interesting that you brought that up, because yesterday I was on Instagram, a bastion of terrible ideas, as that is something that I say a lot because it is, and I follow a lot of atheists hashtags or whatever, because I'm an atheist. I don't necessarily think you should be. I am. Before everybody gets their panties in a bunch. Not you. I'm not worried about you, John. I'm not worried about you. And not just panties, boxers too. But the point is that this guy, so he commented, and a lot of Christians and like very, very religious types also follow these hashtags, right? So they troll people's posts. And so this one guy goes on this like obviously like blatantly atheist post and goes like, Jesus is Lord. I mean, he's just asking for everybody to jump on it, right? Just trolling. So, and I just like comment, no, he's not, right? And that's all. And then I forgot about it, like for like 12 hours. And then then I come back and there's all these posts. And my point is that, and this is what I'm getting at with the manliness, is that he apparently had looked at my profile, which says I'm a cat dad, which I say all the time because I love my cats. And he's like, oh, look at you. Like, what kind of man are you being saying that you're a cat dad on your post? And I was like, wait,
what?
So are you
cat shaming now? I mean, that like cat shaming is part of this whole thing.
The position that I'm not manly because I like my cats? Like, is that the position you're taking? And by the way, this is the guy who believes that a guy rose from the dead. Like, I'm the absurd one. But it just goes to that culture of masculinity is my point. That culture of toxic masculinity, of like chest beating, and to bring it back to the mask question.
Guys who think it's cool. Guys who think it's cool not to wear a motorcycle helmet, who are against the helmet laws, right? I mean, it's like anyone, like, what you really want to be an organ donor that badly? That's
exactly. Like, what are you talking about? Like, get over yourself. Get over yourself. Well,
it's like
go home to
Fox News made a big deal about the fact that Obama was wearing a bicycle helmet. Like, the president of the United States doesn't want to crack his skull, and that's a problem, right? You know, either they wanted to die, or which is probably the case. You know, they wish he would wreck his bike and die. You know,
exactly. And also, by the way, that shows that, and this goes back to the sort of the leadership question, right? Because Donald Trump is not wearing masks. You know, him and Pence and all the leadership are not wearing masks, and it trickles down, right? Like Obama wears a helmet, that makes it not like maybe that makes it a little less uncool for someone to wear a helmet.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Like that.
How many school children's lives were saved because they wore a bike helmet because they saw the president do it? And that's the same thing here with these masks. If Donald Trump would just wear the goddamn mask, right? How many thousands of other people in his cult, in his following, would wear the mask also, because they're like, oh, well, daddy's doing it, so we better do it.
Right. He could make MAGA. He could make ones that say MAGA on it.
That's fine. At least to be alive, right?
Brand it however you'd like. I mean, I don't like the MAGA movement, but I mean, look, I'd rather have the people wearing the damn masks than not, not even for their lives, but for all of ours, right? For all of ours. And by the way, for the recovery of our economy, which is ironic because his entire re-election prospects turn on the economy. And the only way you solve this economic problem is you get the virus under control. That's the only way, right? So it's just like it's like shooting yourself in the foot.
He's driving himself into a whites-only base election strategy. That's where he's driving himself, because he's leaving himself no out. His only other shot at being reelected was to run on the economy, to run on a good economy, and all of a sudden that got, as of February, that dream was over. That was out the window, gone. Okay, so but if we hadn't implemented contact tracing and quarantines by February, we were toast. We still could have made it. We still could have made it not as bad as it is now. We could have improved the situation, but if we wanted to keep it totally out of the country and do like what Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, so many other places have done and minimize their casualties, we could have started that whole process in February. We had a month to get ready after he got notified on January 3rd that this pandemic was coming, right? So he didn't do that. So his actual election strategy that he could have most likely won a second term with,
absolutely,
having a great economy, having all of those things going on, he would have gotten everything he wanted, right?
Exactly.
But he didn't do that, and now he is back to running a grievance election.
Yep, a grievance, right? And the irony of all of this is that for him, and there are so many ironies here, because he's continued to shoot himself in the foot, and we're lucky that he's not Mussolini or Hitler, because if he were really good at this, right? If we were really good at this, we'd be fucked. We'd be fucked, right? Like democracy would be fucked. But he's he's also incompetent, right? He's incompetent, which helps us. It's bad for everybody.
Yeah. He is somewhat incompetent, but what he's not incompetent at, is riling up the base, number one, and number two, voter suppression. And that's his other path to winning, is voter suppression. And so I think he's banking on right now combination of riling up the base and voter suppression to take him across the line. And that's something we should all be very afraid of, because he does control a lot of levers of power that can prevent people from voting. And he also has a lot of governors in red states who are willing to prevent people from voting intentionally. Like, they don't even make any bones.
Definitely. Oh yeah, and almost like brazenly, almost, right? Like it's just like obvious, and again, like that is basically the winning strategy for them at this point. And these are folks who don't have those sort of ethics in terms of voting or anything like that. So it's about power, right? So they will use whatever strategy. You said earlier, I think it was either last week or between a conversation we had separately offline, and that was they are like a cornered animal right now, right? Like on the right, they're like, and especially after Trump, he has painted them into this corner that the only way that they can get out is that strategy, as you say, which is riling up the base with racism and xenophobia and all that, and then also just voter suppression, and that is they're a minority rule party. They have been for a long time, right? George W. Bush didn't win the popular vote, right?
That's right.
They haven't won the popular vote since It's Bush, right? Since Bush won,
I think he might have won the popular vote in 2004.
That's what it was. You're right. The second time he won the popular vote, but not the first time. That's absolutely right. Right.
And also in the state,
right after the Iraq War.
Yeah, and in the states, they're a huge state minority party. I mean, there's some sort of a like if you look at Wisconsin and South Carolina and some of these places like that, Democrats won as much as 8 or 10% more votes, but they have fewer legislators in the state legislature. So,
Yes.
and that controls the redistricting, and that controls the Secretary of State is appointed by the governor. Blah blah blah. On it goes. So you have this voter suppression at every level going on. And we're seeing the tweets. We're seeing this strategy playing out every day. I mean, it's like he was just on Hannity a couple of nights ago, and he said, I think maybe Joe Biden's going to be your president because people don't like me. That was a direct quote from Trump, right? He actually acknowledged.
The president of the United States says that. I mean, on TV, like, come on.
Yeah, when he's talking to his most friendly, sycophantic interviewer that in existence, softball. And he had no answer also when Hannity asked him what his plan was for second term. He pivoted to some grievance again, right? No answer whatsoever. We just got to stop these corrupt Democrats from...
There isn't a coherent plan from him, and there never really was, right? There was it's just general grievance and xenophobia, and also kleptocracy, right? And that's the big thing. That's the big thing. It's just basically like making money off of this hand over fist, right? And that is, I think, is the driving strategy behind a lot of this with Kushner and then Stephen Miller, of course. And we need to Stephen Miller. That's actually a really
heavy graft, coming from the Kushner wing of the family.
Yeah, exactly.
so much graft, and but then it's all backed up we can't get upset about the graft and the emoluments and all that because we're too worried about him, tweeting out white power video. Did you see that one?
Oh my God, I did see it. I saw it this morning. My wife posted this on Facebook today. I was just, again, like my friend Lauren said, it is reprehensible, but absolutely unsurprising.
Not unsurprising. Then he pretends, I didn't hear it, and then he deletes the tweet. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. But then the next thing he's tweeting out law and order. And the next thing which is a huge dog whistle. And then the next thing he said, Joe Biden is shot. Joe Biden is shot. That's what he said. So
unbelievable.
I mean, it's. How does he get away with saying things that would get anyone fired from any job, that would get other people arrested for making threats of violence, all that kind of stuff?
Exactly. Terroristic threats. I think the only Republican that you hear is the one black Republican, in Congress or whatever. He gets on. He was on State of the Union or Face the Nation or something. I can't remember what he was on. It doesn't matter. The point is that he gets on and talks about how, oh my God, I'm going to decry this, and then of course go and vote for support him otherwise. But you didn't hear anything from the Republicans. Nothing.
They're dead silent.
Condemning this, right? And he also had the thing right where he had not a cartoon, but a political ad with the triangle that used to be that's wrapped up. It's a symbol that's wrapped up in fascism.
It's a concentration camp symbol. It was a symbol that they used to put on Jews, when they were sending them to the concentration camps.
It's just insane. This is what we have in the White House. It's insane. And I can tell you, from the first.
This is a good point, I think, to talk about. Both of us kind of intentionally kind of watched American History X this week to try to sort of to kind of trace back what how we got here with this whole thing, because that was really a pivotal movie. I just like to know how because we haven't talked since you saw it. So how did that hit you, seeing that after 22-year-old movie?
Absolutely. It was, you asked me to watch it, and I was like, and I was luckily had some time on Friday afternoon. And so I watched it, and it was, first of all, Edward Norton is amazing in that role. If you haven't seen the movie since the 90s, I highly recommend it because, and I think you said this, Sean, and that is that at the time it seemed over the top, far-fetched, like, oh, like, is this going to happen in America? Because you know how it was in the 90s. In the 90s, right? Like, it was like, I mean, think about even Star Trek: The Next Generation, right? Like, it shot a lot during the 90s. It's like utopic idea, right? No more Soviet Union, right? America's on top. Let's, you know, everybody has justice and freedom. And like, and so you see this movie at that time and it seemed over the top. And now watching it now, I mean, it hits on, I mean, the rhetoric in that movie, Sean, and you pointed this out, is almost verbatim out of some of Trump's speeches. This is Stephen Miller's hands, fingerprints are all over this. I mean, with the vilifying of immigrants, it starts with that, right? It starts with the misogyny, with the vilification of immigrants and Jewish people, and I mean, and the rhetoric of cockroaches, like of invading the country is and all these people, these border jumpers are criminals. I mean, literally, you cannot make this stuff up. This actually you can. It's all made.
I'm pretty sure that Stephen Miller, you know, I mean, he actually grew up in that area where that was shot, which is right around Santa Monica, Venice area, right?
Absolutely.
So he grew up there and went to high school there, and I can pretty much guarantee you that he was involved in some way in you know, the white supremacist, because that movie is based on a true story. It's actually based on a true story, right. And I'm pretty sure that even if he wasn't involved at that time, that having watched that film, that stuff, I mean, it made it into the inauguration, like Trump's inaugural speech contained language in that film, you know? And I just want to know,
language.
I want to ask you because I need to shut up because, you know, the bottom line is I recognize that film was, Hollywood generally, you know, takes a perspective against racism. And the film was clearly portrayed as a cautionary tale, as a horrible thing, as a hate crime, all of those things like that. You know, it was portrayed that way. But still, how did this affect you as a Black man in America?
Sure, absolutely, and you know, I think that's an important question, and you know, I think that there's a couple themes that that come to mind immediately. So, and I'll just take a quick second to sort of back up and talk about where I have been. So, you know, having grown up as a young person in the 90s in a very white environment, like I had no sort of connection to Blackness, like really at all. Like that, in fact, I had every incentive to suppress the Blackness because it made me stand out. And I was coming from an outsider, from an outside perspective, as an outsider, and I just wanted to fit in. And so I really didn't even watch this movie, I think, from beginning to end in the 90s, because this kind of stuff was stuff that I didn't want to entertain. Watching it now, though, you know, like watching it now, it was extremely powerful for me. I think that it speaks to the sort of tension that exists that exists in the Black community, but more importantly, it really encapsulates sort of, you know, the white resistance to change. So, you know, it's because again, it's a white power movie. It seems really extreme. It seems like really over the top. But again, and we talked about it a little bit last week, that is just sort of like an extreme version of the same idea, right? The same idea that like, this is our America, not their America. This theme was all through this movie. That was all through this movie. That this is our America. We're going to stand. We're not going to let the liberals, you know, turn this into one of those shithole countries, blah, 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 blah. And so, you know, and so, you know, it was, and from that perspective, really telling. I thought also that it really tells the story of the co-option of young white boys by the alt-right and these sort of white power groups. They go to these kids that are feeling or just like despondent, right? They feel that like, you know, they don't have any girlfriends, right? You know, they don't feel like they don't have a lot of economic perspective, but like prospects, right? And they start with the misogyny. They start with the misogyny because every young man and every man that's watching this can identify with being frustrated by the girl not liking you, right? And then it's really easy to turn that into, oh well, fuck that bitch, right? Then next thing you know, you're throwing up fucking Zig Heils, right?
Yeah. Well, here's how it starts. I was reading an article that was, I believe it was in the Atlantic or somewhere. It was about a year ago. And it was talking about, it was a mother who was writing, like this very thing. They're coming for your young boys. And her son actually got radicalized because he got in trouble at school for telling a dirty joke. And it wasn't even really a dirty joke. It wasn't even that bad. It was something that was misconstrued by a girl. He probably shouldn't have said it, but he was like 11 or something, right? And so, 11-year-olds, what are you going to do? What are you going to do with an 11-year-old? They say shit, they don't even say inappropriate things all the time. That's that. So as an 11-year-old, he's in school and he gets expelled. And so he has to go to a special school, for problem kids or whatever it is. And, now he doesn't have any friends. And now, by the time he's 14, this kid is moderating basically a Nazi chat room. And all the people in this, they're all like older men, older adults, who are in this chat room. They don't know he's 14. So he's like basically created this whole universe for himself where he's somebody. Right, he's someone in this.
Exactly, he's somebody. Right, they count for something. Right, that's the thing. Right, and you know what? It's so interesting, Sean, because as I was watching this, I felt myself. Like I was like, oh, I understand why a kid ends up there, and it's so crazy coming from a black man, right? Coming from a black man, from an activist, right? From a person who cares about racial justice and cares about justice and hates white supremacy, but still, from a human perspective, I understand how this 14-year-old kid following his brother, right? Following his friends, feeling like an outcast in school. Because I remember feeling like an outcast myself, Sean. Like I remember being on the opposite end of that, right? And feeling like an outcast. I know what it feels like to want to fit in.
Yeah.
It's no surprise that we send 18, 19, and 20-year-old boys to war, because you can convince them of anything, anything.
Well, and that's okay. So I think the heart. Okay, there's a lot of heartbreaking things in that film, but the real heart, the heart of that film. Okay, well, a couple of different places, but the first place where you really started to see really feel something. That maybe Ed Norton was a complicated character. He wasn't just a monster, right?
Exactly.
And that is when he was in the prison laundry. He's in the prison laundry, and literally for the first, I don't know, 6 months of his sentence or whatever, he goes to the laundry, and there's a black guy in there who's in charge of the laundry, right? And, they basically said to them, when he got to the prison, they said, hey, you're a white guy. Well, you're the N-word here,
I love that. That was one of my favorite lines in the entire movie. It's like, no. Here, you're the N-word. You're the N-word here.
Exactly. So he goes in and he won't even talk to the guy. Like, he starts to like the guy. You see him, he kind of laughs at some of the guy's jokes. He in spite of himself, he starts to like the guy. He's like, this guy's really cool, but he can't get through his pride. And so there's this process where he goes through and he finally breaks down. I think I'm pretty sure the moment when it finally all broke down and he started actually having a conversation there was some discussion about a woman and about a woman and makeup sex. And it was this whole thing that every man can relate to this. Every man can relate to what's saying. So suddenly, instead of being blackness and whiteness, they were relating as men, as human beings. And now all of a sudden you have this situation where this guy saves his life.
Unbelievable. Literally saves his life, right? Like he would not have made it out of that prison alive if not for this one black guy, right, who stands up for him, because and it's so powerful, right? Because it's, again, breaks down, like you just said, breaks down that bridge and like that sort of that barrier. And again, I like to keep doing this because I think it's important for everyone out there to not write this off as, oh, well, he was a white supremacist, but like, right, because the process of coming to terms with white privilege is the same, right? The initial reaction is, no, there's no such thing. I don't do white supremacy. I'm not a white supremacist. I'm not a racist. I don't know I grew up tough, Like over time, when you really start to understand it, there's a point at which you have to if you're honest with yourself, just like Ed Norton got to a point where he had to be honest with himself. It's like, my ideas about these people are just not, there's dissonance going on all of a sudden, right? There's dissonance. You can see the dissonance going on in his mind. And I think that there's a similar story to be told about people that are trying to come to terms with ideas like white privilege and systemic racism, right? And recognize that these things really do exist and get past the pride of denying it.
the cure for him was human connection, right?
Absolutely.
And the problem with this, and I'm on this every day with somebody who's like, oh, I'm not racist. And to me,
Sure.
the denial, any white person who denies racism, that's the first evidence. That is the strongest evidence of their racism, because anyone who's not racist, there's only one thing a white person can say, at least that's how I feel. And that is that I am a recovering racist. I was raised as a racist, and I'm recovering from that. And therefore, to make amends for how I was raised and how I behaved, because I'm not absolving myself of responsibility, but to make amends for how I behaved and how I benefited from my white privilege, okay, I am going to become an active anti-racist. So making that jump from saying, oh, I'm not racist, I don't care if you're black, yellow, brown, or purple, which is what they all say, right?
No, they always say that. They always
say that. And then, oh, I don't see color. Those things. These are all of these denials that just keep the cycle going and going and going, because it involves taking responsibility. Anyone who's ever been in a 12-step program knows that the first thing you have to do is admit you have a problem. That's the first step, right? And then you could you get somewhere way down the line where you're making amends, right?
Exactly.
But I'm not a big believer in 12 steps, but I do understand, even from an engineering perspective, if you're going to solve the problem, first you have to acknowledge that it exists.
Exactly. Right. And that is one of the problems, by the way, with I think the GOP-led Senate was trying to pass a police reform bill, but without actually sort of acknowledging that there is problem with that there is like systemic racism in policing, right? So like if you can't first acknowledge that there is a problem, then whatever solution you come up with is going to be, it's obviously, it's just political for there. I mean, they just have to do something. That's the only reason why they're doing it at all. But
it's just another way of sweeping the problem under the rug, and it's like we were talking about with COVID, okay? The libertarians never want to talk about systemic issues. They only ever want to talk about the individual. Because as soon as you acknowledge that something is systemic, what that means is that there have to be reforms and laws that affect everybody. And it's the freedom from versus freedom to, again, that you're talking about. They want freedom to do all of those things. But they, the idea of freedom from systemic racism makes their heads explode.
Exactly.
And there was actually, there's actually somebody on the Las Vegas City Council. I was just reading. I don't remember her name, but she, she's been called out by the NAACP because she got on TV or in this council meeting, whatever, and denied the existence of systemic racism. And her whole thing is, well, everybody I know, all the cops I know, none of them are racist. None of the people in the city council are racist. So if none of those people are racist, how could the system be racist?
Right. Exactly. No one I know is sick. Right. COVID-19. Right. No one I know is sick. I don't see any sick people. Therefore, the disease isn't real. Like it's the same. Right? It's the same sort of like really failed reasoning. But again, motivated reasoning. Right. It's motivated reasoning. It's not just failed reasoning. It's motivated reasoning because you don't want to admit it because then you might have to fix it. And if that means if you have to fix it, and again, it's always telling that anyone who's making those kind of arguments is always already on the top of the hierarchy. Right. So because no one that has someone because that's why libertarians are always well-off white men, always like 9 times out of 10,
healthy, healthy, good job, all that.
Always, because of course you just want to be able to do things. You don't want to have your freedoms curtailed, which just means that other people also have a chance and have right. And again, it's maddening, but there's a whole sort of essentially a jurisprudence of a reason, not really jurisprudence, but a whole sort of like sort of academic structure that's built around this concept of how do I justify being on top of the hierarchy and everyone else being fucked, right? Like, and that's what libertarianism is,
Well, and that's the famous. There's an example. Rawls' veil of ignorance is the perfect. If you don't know where you're going to be in the society, design a society where you would be safe. Right? Even if you were born the most disadvantaged, poor person, you have to design the society. And any such society is going to balance out freedom from with freedom to.
Exactly, and so true, and I'm not, I'm not a huge Rawls guy, but the veil of ignorance concept, and the original position, right? The veil of ignorance concept is genius. It's genius because any libertarian, right, who is honest with him or herself, and I actually just call him himself because that's just how it is.
It's mostly not women.
It's mostly not women. Mostly, but if you're honest with yourself, and if you didn't have a choice, and what it does is that it reveals the hypocrisy of libertarianism like right away. Because if you right, because obviously you wouldn't want unfettered freedom for somebody else if that means you get screwed over. And so I think this is important, the mask thing, and there was an anti-seatbelt right when the seatbelt laws.
Yes.
It was a similar outrage from the
There was anti-airbags. There was anti-airbags, if you can believe it.
I mean, it's remarkable, and it's always just and now, right? Like you get in the car, and it's like, I mean, I feel naked if I'm driving without a seatbelt on. Like
absolutely,
I feel like I'm walking around naked.
You feel weird, completely weird.
And it saves millions of lives. Like it saves thousands of lives a year. It has saved millions of lives, right? But again, and the mask is the same thing, right? And again, it's this idea that like I shouldn't have to compromise my little liberty.
Anything. I mean, I'm old enough to remember in the mid 1970s. Okay, in the mid 1970s, I think it was a 1974 model. It was during the Nixon administration. So I guess Anyway, what happened is that they installed a buzzer. Like now, if you don't put your seatbelt on, it beeps for like 10 seconds and then it stops.
Yeah. Right.
This buzzer never stopped. So until you buckled your seatbelt, the buzzer just kept going. It would go all day. Okay. So that only was like that for like 1 year. And people were so angry that they took it out the next year. But the fact of the matter is that everybody I knew when that came out buckled their seatbelt underneath of them. They just left it buckled the whole time, so they didn't have to put it on. And that really reminds me so much of what's going on with masks right now.
That's so interesting. That is so interesting, right? Rather than just do it. It's like you're gonna
just do it. Just put it on.
You're making your life more difficult. Like, and we could talk about deontology here versus like this ideas in like the purity of an abstract idea as opposed to consequentialism. And it's like, how does that idea impact real people? And we should tweak things based on that, right? But the deontologist says, oh no, liberty, pure liberty, no matter what, that principle matters more than lives. That principle matters more than real people's lives. And that's why I hate deontology. And I hate it. I hate
deontology and I hate libertarianism for that reason, because it's bad enough. For the same reason. It's bad enough for white people, okay? Because there's all kinds of poor white people who are affected by these libertarian policies, tax and service cuts, right? Sure. But imagine however bad it is for white people, it's twice or 3 or 10 times worse for black people.
Always is. It always is, right? Like death rates, I mean, to any metric. I literally
had a guy say to me, we were discussing this whole thing, and I was talking about how disadvantaged blacks have been for so long. And he's like, but they all know that. Everybody knows that. So why don't, at least some of them have got to be able to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps, right? I mean, and I'm just going like, how, it is a knee-jerk reaction. It is a knee-jerk reaction that is just, I've almost never run across, once you meet a white person who is going to deny, if they say all lives matter or whatever they're going to say, once they've indicated that they are a racist, they are going to give you the whole litany of arguments all down the line.
Oh my God. And it's always the same arguments. Always the same argument. Always. It always is. And this is a really interesting point, because I had a friend of mine, a guy that I knew when I was growing up. And I wrote a post about this. I won't go into the details, but you can look on my Facebook, everybody, it's public. But it's basically, he said a racial slur in my presence when we were very young, and 15 years old. And years later at a friend's wedding, he called me before one of our friends' wedding, and I picked up the phone and I was like, and I hung up the phone with him. And I was just like, wait a second. I remember that time when he said that. And I went back and talked to him about it, and I confronted him about it. And then over the ensuing like year or whatever, our relationship deteriorated. And eventually he unfriended me on Facebook because he didn't like some of my posts. He thinks I'm self-righteous, whatever. But my point is that, you know, in his like farewell DM, he listed all of those arguments. I mean, like literally one argument after another. I mean, from like, you know, the all lives matter to the it's not all about race to, I mean, like just the textbook, like, you know, like, right, all these sort of arguments.
So what this is it's like, because I know white culture because I grew up in it, and you do too. And so you know this.
Yeah, I grew up in it.
These guys know it's wrong. They know it's wrong. They absolutely know on a deep level it's wrong. They don't want to admit it because it would mean that they would have to do something. They feel like they would lose income, lose status, lose all of these things. And so these are bricks in a wall. They just build these bricks in this wall that prevents them from needing to change or acknowledge anyone, or that, you know, they are a selfish person or an antisocial person or a sociopathic person even, you know, because a lot of these guys really do get off on, you know, on being superior and watching other inferior people fail, you know?
Absolutely. So, absolutely. I mean, we're talking about, well, again, we keep coming back to hierarchy and I think it's so important. I mean, like, you know, getting back to the film just briefly, and that was like what I noticed throughout the film that was really, really, I mean, interesting. It's a 90s film, so it really always has like the sort of, you know, it felt like a 90s film where, you know, it like addiction and like family and reconciliation is always like a big theme in those, like in these films, and like, right, and like the like typical tropes of like, you know, a black versus white were there and all this sort of like very 90s.
Magnolia, but you know.
yeah, exactly. It's like, all right, you know, but still everybody watch it. It holds up.
Right.
But I think, you know, what got me was that, like, you know, watching, and Ed Norton again is brilliant in the movie, but like the central character, like it was like a drug for him. The anger, the rage, that's what I love that he brought to the movie. When you look into his eyes, you could just see this seething rage, right? And it was almost like, and when he does the murder, when he actually commits the murder, right? Like, oh my God,
that was one of the most horrifying scenes ever.
One of the most horrifying scenes, like I think of all time on TV. It's just awful, but it's, you know, but the arrest afterward, during the arrest.
But this business, when he's doing this.
His hands up with a big swastika on his chest, and he's just like pumped up. Like you can, like, he doesn't even feel any remorse. He spits on the guy afterward. He spits on the guy, right? Like, and so it's just like so powerful. But my point is, like, what was my point? I do this all the time. I lose my point. But anyway, like, but like, I think that there is a this is what I was saying. Like, you know, there is a reluctance to give up that sense of power, right? That power. We were talking about not wanting to admit. Not wanting to feel good about being above somebody, right? Like, right, feel empowered. And that's what I saw in that movie. And again, I keep railing on this, is that, like, yes, don't everybody out there, don't like sort of give that away as like, oh, he's a white supremacist. Yes, but that's just an extreme version of the same idea. It's just an extreme version of the same idea, right? Which means it's hierarchy, it's power, and it's people being below you and subservient to you. It's always that concept, always.
And you know, this was the way that he was radicalized. Okay, he was radicalized two ways. Okay, it was through that. There was the speech, which I'm sure that wasn't the only time it happened. The speech at the dinner table about affirmative action.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
okay, that was extremely important. And and the way that they introduced it was really brilliant too, because apparently, you know, the Avery Brooks character was Ed Norton's teacher at school, right? And so he introduced him to the book Native Son, which was essentially an entire novel that was written to catalog the Black experience of systemic racism. I believe it was in Chicago.
Sure.
I haven't read the book, but you know, I put it on the stack of like 100 books that I need to read.
Yeah, exactly. Put it on the stack.
I get what it was trying to say, and so he tells his father, you know, about this book and how he's starting to understand that the blacks have a different experience. And his dad goes off to the point where, you know, he just goes off, and he's like, the idea that there would be any consideration for any past disadvantage, you know, is going to, in his mind, cost the white man something, and is a lie and a manipulation that cannot stand. That cannot stand. And so that's the first time that the kid has probably heard. He's just going to school and he's learning. He's like learning about the world, and he learns about the Black experience, and all of a sudden he's being told, no, that's propaganda. Those are lies. And that set him off. And then we don't know how long after that conversation the father was killed in a fire, right? Mm-hmm. But he, right. So the kid, he loses his father, who's his main role model, the person he looks up to in all the world. At the same time as his father's like sort of parting shot, before he dies, is this speech about race and about how the whites have to protect themselves and have to resist any accommodation whatsoever. And so that was a pivotal moment in the film. And I think that for a lot of people, it really resonated with me because I just got into a conversation on the LA Times, because this is up right now on the ballot in November in California, reinstating affirmative action, because it was put in place in California in the late 60s, early 70s. And then actually when the Republicans got control in California for a few years, they passed a constitutional amendment against affirmative action. Constitutional amendment in California. So it's like, you just can't make this stuff up. You can't make it up. So now it's coming back again. We got to fight this whole battle all over again. And the same people are coming forward and saying, oh, well, if somebody has a degree from Harvard, how do we know it's a real degree then if they got in because of affirmative action? And it's just like, I mean, these are...
I really felt that when he said that in the movie, because I've been asked so many times. I went to Georgetown Law School for law school, right? It's a really good law school. I work really, really hard in college. I work really, really hard in law school, right? And I turned my life around. I mean, I started out, I had I drug problems when I was in high school, and I didn't even go to college at first, and I really proud of all this change and turning my life around, whatever. And I can't tell you the number of times I've had, and it's always a white man every damn time, a white man telling me, literally, one guy explicitly asked me, I remember it was in Montclair, in a bar in Montclair, and he actually asked me, he's like, so do you think that you got into Georgetown because of affirmative action or because of X, Y, and Z? Like literally, like this, right? Or if people, I remember another one of my favorites is like, oh, what do you do for a living? I'm a lawyer, a black lawyer, huh? Wow. And this is during Obama, by the way, was already president during that particular incident. When I was just like, the president is a black lawyer, right?
They never even recognized.
But when he said that, the affirmative action thing in the film, it really, that was like, I remember, because I was like, so this is where it starts, right? This is where it starts, right? This is where it fucking starts.
With adults, it's affirmative action. With young boys, it's dirty jokes. Those two things.
Dirty jokes, exactly.
Dirty jokes.
They want to be getting in trouble.
It's like, oh, you're so offended. I can't say anything anymore. This kind of stuff. It's just they feel somehow, because the dirty jokes are usually that they get in trouble for. It's not like a sexual reference unless it's a misogynist reference.
Exactly.
Right? Exactly. It has to be the jokes they're going to get in trouble for are jokes that punch down against vulnerable people, and then you're going to get a liberal educator who's like, that's not cool. You can't do that.
Right.
And then they're like, oh, my free speech. And then it gets into this whole thing. And the Nazis, the alt-right chat boards are telling these kids they have a right to say those things.
Exactly. And that's an interesting talk about, but I don't know how much time we have left in this segment, but I want to.
We actually have blown past our time. I think we're at an hour right now, but so we'll have to we'll save our free speech discussion for
the next
episode. But I think we should wrap up on what you were going to say.
Yeah, I was just going to say this, and you mentioned Avery Brooks. Avery Brooks in the movie. Avery Brooks is also he was big in the '90s, black guy, bald head like me, and he was in Deep Space Nine, Star Trek Deep Space Nine. One of my favorites. Love him. He's just great. Powerful actor. But anyway, I'm bringing this up because he is the reason why both generations of boys in that movie, the two main characters in the movie, he helps them recover, right? He brings them out. He pulls them out because he believes in them, right? And I'm bringing this up as a closing because early in this George Floyd thing, my initial reaction was to be like, all right, thank God. And was like, first of all, I didn't believe it. Second, I didn't believe that white people cared. And then when white people did start to care, I was like, where the hell have you guys been? And then my third thing was like, well, you know what? Why should I even do this anymore? You guys do it. But like, you know, I think like watching that Avery Brooks character, you asked me how this affected me. I was thinking to myself, like, how can I, if I'm an activist, how can I be a person like Avery Brooks, right? Like, I'm not going to go to white supremacists, but how can I help as a person who has my legs in both, I have to straddle the line between white culture and black culture. How can I help bridge that gap? And I think that's a lot of the stuff that I care about. And I think the movie, one of my largest takeaways, I literally got misty-eyed at the end of that movie, by the way.
Me too.
I'm not ashamed to admit it.
Well, the ending was horrible. The ending was horrible.
Oh
One of the worst endings to any film. I mean, just a punch in the gut, you know, after this whole thing.
You know. But anyway, so that's my piece. But you know, it's been a really great show. I'll let you talk us off, Sean.
Yeah, well, thanks to all of our viewers and listeners for watching. We're really going to get this together and you know, get our branding together and announce. You know, we'll probably do a few more shows just as a test run, but we really want to do this on a regular basis and build an audience. So thank you for being here with us, and we really enjoyed it. Hope you did as well. See you next time.
See you later, everybody.